Simon Rattle is the British conductor who conquered the world.
Simon Rattle!
And all my musicians and myself, we send you our love. Bless you.
From opera to oratorio, early music to modernism, Rattle has always led from the front.
If you just watch him, you can tell he's a great conductor.
He is both a master, and at the same time, he has the openness of a child.
His ears are enormous, like an elephant.
And his genius is his sympathy with all the players in front of him.
He has been a cultural dynamo in cities from Birmingham to Berlin. This is a conducted tour of Simon Rattle's 60th year.
It's actually, what bargain do you make with the devil?
Sir Simon Rattle is the music director and chief conductor of the orchestra many people consider to be the ultimate classical music machine, the Berlin Philharmonic. Berlin is a city on the fault line of history. Largely destroyed at the end of the Second World War, divided for more than a generation by the Berlin Wall, a towering grey symbol of the Cold War. And over the last quarter of a century, rebuilt and re-established as capital of one Germany.
When I first used to come here, people would say, oh, the saxophone player, he's coming from Germany to here. They didn't say he's coming from Frankfurt, because it was such an island. It's a very different shared history. I wonder what we would be like tested to that degree. I wouldn't be that optimistic. The nearest to tyranny my generation has gone through is Margaret Thatcher. We've led a very protected life.
Rattle is on his way to the home of his orchestra, the Philharmonie, purpose-built in the 1950s, hard up against the Berlin Wall on the western side. A striking Cold War political statement.
Just by the Phil, there was the east and here's the west. That was no man's land. I can just about remember, but only just. It makes no sense, so it's hard to keep in the mind.
Rattle has always pushed the boundaries of music, and this evening he's due to conduct a staged version of Bach's St. John Passion, one of the masterpieces of church music that some people consider too sacred to be dramatised.
This is Germany. Everything is sacred here. So you can always upset some people. But certainly the whole idea of staging a Bach Passion was very hard. It took 2 years to persuade the orchestra, with still some people begging me not to do it.
For a lot of people, it's a holy piece where you are really supposed to stand and sing as in a concert.
Rattle's controversial vision for the Passion involves orchestra, choir and soloists all acting out the gospel story on the stage of the Philharmonie.
The orchestra were quite nervous of what they'd been asked to do. And Simon has got great daring and never seemed to panic about sort of negative feedback he got, and really sort of created something that went into the piece in a much deeper way than normal.
He took something so sacred that people were afraid of touching and said, actually, not only is nothing sacred, but the very attempt to grasp it is the noblest thing we can do.
If you've never heard this, you go completely unprepared. It changes your life.
It was a good argument to have. I'm glad we didn't back down, because it's brought the orchestra and the singers together in a way that almost nothing else does, because it gives them the right level of responsibility, which is almost everything.
Simon is not one of those conductors who's into the contest of wills. It's not me versus you and I win, because I have the stick. Simon genuinely is interested in the possibility of democracy. And he has this incredible sense of what's the best way to get a whole group of people to have an amazing moment of discovery together.
You can sing in the chorus, you can be a soloist, you can be a musician from the orchestra. We're all the same to him.
If Bach doesn't teach you humility, kind of nothing will. Our world divides into people who are supremely confident and those who have doubts every day. And I'm on the doubts every day team. Probably just as well. Means you don't take too much for granted. But sometimes it makes it, of course it makes it hard. This is a hard profession and it doesn't get any easier. You have to get used to that, and you have to do the best you can and realize that that is the best you can do.
The music pours out of him. But that wouldn't work if it wasn't for the integrity, the personality, the chemistry that goes on when Simon Rattle's about.
Working with Simon is intriguing because he is both a master and at the same time he has the openness of a child. I've sung this role many times in concert performances. I thought I knew the St. John Passion, but he wants me to listen to it differently.
Jesus antwortete, ich hab's euch gesagt, dass ich sei. Suchet ihr denn mich, so lasset diese gehen.
He loves fresh interpretations. He always gives us the feeling the world has to hear this music and the world has to see us doing this piece.
He seems to be in a perpetual state of wonder. He knows what he wants, that's very clear, but he also loves working in the moment with what is in front of him.
With this type of staging, there was even more emotions going on, not only from performance, but also from the people in the audience. It didn't necessarily have to be about their relationship with Jesus or religion, but it was all about actually human beings, about their lives. They all left the hall with tears in their eyes.
He's wonderful. I think he's wonderful.
I'm really astonished. That's just amazing.
I was really impressed. I thought the singers were talking to me.
It was great. This is really a privilege.
Of course, it was very British.
Simon Rattle was born and grew up in Liverpool.
There's a kind of narrative I'm supposed to give, isn't there? About the Beatles and the Ants, winning Liverpool and all that stuff, and having a house near Penny Lane, which actually we did, going to the Cavern, which actually I didn't. And look, the peculiar thing is there was so much going on in Liverpool at the time, so that it was actually kind of possible to miss most of that.
He came from a very musical and supportive family, and one of the first things that he did was to learn to read scores. And then he would put on little concerts at home where everybody was assigned a percussion instrument and had to play along.
When I was 15, I heard Liverpool Philharmonic in their ongoing Mahler cycle. I suppose that was such a powerful, life-changing event for me. I can remember everything about the 3 or 4 days around it, just because it was as though it had been tattooed onto my skin. And it sounds tremendously ridiculous and pretentious and over the top, but all the colours of the flowers seemed brighter. From that moment on, I wasn't going to be the same. And I would certainly put that at the centre of why I became a conductor.
His natural affinity with music is basically, shall we say, God-given. Simon was already at 19 winning competitions and conducting orchestras. The opportunities came so young.
After he won a conducting competition at the Seaside in Bournemouth in 1974, he was appointed assistant conductor of the Bournemouth Sinfonietta.
It's a wonderful chamber orchestra that no longer exists. What they must have had to put up with.
Together they toured the south coast, and he had his first experiences with opera at Glyndebourne.
There was a point where in 14 days I conducted 20 concerts with them. And, oh God, they must have been terrible.
His breakthrough came 2 years later with his appointment as assistant conductor of the BBC Scottish Symphony Orchestra in Glasgow. He was 22 years old.
Are there any special problems, do you think, in conducting a major orchestra when you are so young? Though?
Well, I mean, the first problem is that however old or young you are, if you're under 40, you're still a young conductor, and therefore perhaps slightly suspect.
I was utterly not ready for it. But looking back, I do wonder who is ready to start a conducting career. There's this wonderful thing in a Woody Allen film where he says, you know, actually I'm one of the world's greatest lovers, but normally I only get to practice it on my own. And it's a rather similar thing, because actually without doing it, you don't know how to do it. And so where do you practice? I couldn't find an orchestra in my bedroom, however hard I waved a baton at the mirror. BBC job in Glasgow, I conducted so much, and I was given the opportunity to litter the floor with mistakes. And what an incredible privilege to have so many rough edges knocked off so fast. It was tough. I can remember thinking, oh, no, if this is really what it's like, this is no place for me. It's actually, what bargain do you make with the devil? As a young musician, you have to sort out really who you are. And is the musician the same person as the everyday person? Can they be linked together? Are you always going to be Jekyll and Hyde?
Conductors are the last autocrats left. I hope, actually, that the day of the autocrat is over for us. It's much easier for me to have a cheerful relationship.
What percentage of Jekyll and what percentage of Hyde there is, God only knows. You have to see what you are, and you also have to decide What is music to you? Does music mean life, which is dangerous? Or can you really decide, okay, I have a life of which music is an incredibly enriching part?
And I think, one of my faults is that I can often love music to death. It's a lovely way to go.
As for all great orchestras, touring for the Berlin Philharmonic is important and demanding. Rattle and the orchestra have just arrived in Taiwan. In the capital city, Taipei, a vast metropolis of more than 7 million people, the orchestra are scheduled to give 2 performances here at the ornate National Concert Hall, and naturally, expectations are riding high.
There's a kind of passion for classical music here, which is so unusual. And it has to be cultural, because unlike in mainland China, classical music is continuous here. Obviously, Mao Zedong stopped it in the most dramatic and brutal way. Here it stayed, and it's one of the things that makes them different from the mainland, and of which they're very proud. And they're a particularly thoughtful island. They know this can be lost. They know it can be destroyed. Maybe we take it too much for granted. Here they know what can happen, and so they've grabbed onto it with a passion which is very, very moving, and you really feel it playing to them.
Here in the National Concert Hall of Taiwan, there is only going to be time for 1 rehearsal before tonight's concert. So conductor and orchestra have to make every second count.
Today we needed to rehearse quite hard because you have to get used to a very different, very bright hall. So sometimes it's useful, particularly on the first day of a tour when people haven't played for a few days. It's part of our job. All that's important is that the evening really works.
Simon has brought this orchestra incredible presence. If you just watch him, you can tell he's a great conductor. He's in the music, he's leading the orchestra, he's passionate, his expression is fantastic. He has the genius of the music inside him and also the ability to express it through his hands, through his body, through his face.
I admire most his absolute concentration and awareness of everything which happens maybe far away in other parts of the orchestra. His ears are enormous, like an elephant.
He brings dedication to work and to the work, the piece that we play. He brings musical inspiration from his knowledge and from his understanding, and fantastic enthusiasm for music.
Tonight's concert will be relayed live to a big screen set up in the square outside the concert hall, and tens of thousands of people are expected to turn up. It's nearly showtime, the square is packed, full to capacity, and inside the hall, the concert is sold out.
It's funny though, what we're hearing, we're so used to this bass clapping of the German orchestra. It's deep in here. Yeah, but it's fantastic, has its own fantastic spirit. Picante. Oh, have fun, you guys. Well, the thing about the audiences here is that they're very sophisticated. And there might be places where you would be a little bit loath to take a program of Boulet's Notation and Bruckner's Seventh Symphony, but not in Taiwan. I'm thrilled to be able to bring this to them. And in a way, it's what we do. We want to take a great big Austrian romantic piece and one of the greatest works written in the last 30 years. It's characteristic of what we're trying to do.
As soon as the concert finishes, Rattle and the players make their way outside, where the people of Taipei are waiting.
Don't leave me alone, you bastards.
No, we didn't. Going out onto that stage afterwards to meet our audience, it was the most incredible experience, the way they just go crazy at the end.
We came out of the concert and there were 40,000 people outside there.
From all my musicians and myself, we send you our love. Bless you.
I was standing directly next to Simon, and he said, in all this noise, he said, "Oh, now I know what Robbie Williams must feel like."
For them, it's still surprising to see one of those long noses, as they say in Chinese, to see somebody speak Chinese. My wife is Chinese, and I learned some Chinese to survive in my family.
For us, we know it's a privilege when we go out there and we see all those guys. The amount of applause can be a wonderful thing, but you better not believe it. You better not believe it too much. And you always realize that there's always going to be differing opinions. But look, every now and then you can say, okay, that was a moment we really did our best. Maybe we deserve some of this.
Before he faces the orchestra, Rattle spends hours alone in the conductor's study at the Philharmonie, working on the score.
It was extraordinary. Every other art form, you can look at a painting and it's there. You can read a book and it's there. This requires people to interpret it. A relatively simple score I can hear immediately in my head. Sometimes there's just nothing for it but to check it yourself. Wagner wrote it for such a huge string group, just to make sure which version of this kind of extraordinary bit of clouds. It's unbelievable because all the parts cross over each other. So you really do get the idea of clouds. Ever since I was a kid, I've had an absolute non-stop soundtrack of music going through my head. I thought everybody did, and I was rather stunned to realize later in life that that's actually not normal, but it never stops. Desk 3, and they're playing the long notes. That's confusing. I used to find it hard to go to sleep with the music in there, and I remember having to kind of bash my head backwards and forwards, almost to kind of, at night, to try and to get it out of the ear. You get a little kind of fricassee of Brahms and the music from Harry Potter. It's utterly undenominational. It's an equal opportunities barrel of garbage going on up there. Music has the possibility of saying to people, you're not alone. Somebody else understands this, somebody else has felt this. This interprets where you are in the world. Another life I could have imagined being an actor. And of course, in some ways you are an actor doing this.
As I wandered down a street as used to be in Brummagem, I know nobody I did meet, they've changed their faces in Brummagem.
The city that really made Simon Rattle's reputation was Birmingham, where he arrived in 1980, at the age of 25, and fired up with enthusiasm.
It's a vocation, it's crazy. It's like, I don't know, Werner Herzog pushing a ship over a mountain. You have to do it because you are desperate to do it. Otherwise, don't bother, because it's tough. It's like sleeping outside. You know, it's wonderful, but it's cold at night as well.
When he left 18 years later, Birmingham was transformed, and he was a household name.
Simon Rattle. Simon Rattle.
He's a highly thought-of conductor.
Simon Rattle.
Now he has returned to the city for the day to rehearse for a benefit concert with the orchestra he took to world status, the CBSO, the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra.
It's the first musical family, really, I had, and it still feels like it. They were telling me yesterday, there are a few people who were here before I came, and they call them the pre-Rattleites. But there's such a lot of history. We built this place together, and we built what the orchestra is. Hush, hush, hush. When I came here, I was 25, and lots of people were 25. And we put it together, if you can say that in English. The orchestra had lost its principal conductor. I mean, it was a kind of extraordinary story, is that the manager of the orchestra was also the principal conductor's agent. And the orchestra had a vote of no confidence in the manager. The manager stayed and the conductor walked out. And so they really needed someone to look after them. And I remember when I came, we started working, they said, oh God, we're just so happy to see, are we going to play this short or long, or on the string or off the string, or when are we going to breathe in these chords? And just all this, what I'd call the dental hygiene of the conductor and orchestra's relationship.
Go. Now, can I take the violins, this orchestra, 1 before 23, the long notes, could you use very, very little bow, so we're in a good place for the off-the-string thing?
Almost a year ago, I became principal conductor of the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, and the BBC came up with the rather alarming idea of filming our first day's work together.
And so the B-flat particularly is a light. Just do that.
I thought it would be a good opportunity to show you how a conductor and an orchestra work together to prepare a performance.
Yeah, stop. Yeah, stop. Please.
They wanted to put themselves back on track. God knows why they thought I could be the person to do it, because I had so much to learn.
So we hear the difference. Okay.
He's been described as one of the world's most brilliant conductors, while remaining an impossibly, unbelievably normal chap.
Of course, the conductor is the only person who doesn't play wrong notes and who nobody actually hears. The only thing that I could say in my defense is conductors only really start becoming halfway competent by the time they're 60. So I've got a few more years to go.
Together, he and this CBSO will develop until it's rightly recognised as a world-class orchestra.
He was conducting every work for the first time, and he was making experiments with them. And as a similarly young man, I was so nervous with everybody. And I just watched him open-mouthed as, even at the age of 25, he could command the room. And this is something he's carried with him all his life.
He set a model when he came to Birmingham. The 60s and 70s, music directors of orchestras were flying in and out. The age of the jumbo jet. So you weren't a proper conductor unless you were in and out of a jumbo jet every other week. He lived in Birmingham. He spent an enormous amount of time seriously working with the orchestra, and without many changes in terms of personnel, turned them into something very special. And it's an example of the famous phrase that there's no such thing as bad orchestras, there's only bad conductors.
All the players were behind what Simon was trying to do and were prepared to work their socks off until the last minute of a rehearsal.
But since we were never going to sound like the Berlin Philharmonic, and the orchestra had always this lightness on its feet, we decided basically that we would make ourselves into the best white wine we could possibly be.
Now, Simon Rattle, this highly distinguished conductor who really could have the choice of any orchestra in the world, but he chooses the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra.
Rattle's belief in the potential of his orchestra and the growing recognition that these players needed a new concert hall worthy of their status would have a profound effect.
The redevelopment of Birmingham in the 1980s is due to Simon being at the CBSO. The creation of tens of thousands of jobs, transforming a cityscape through the arts. This all comes down to the regeneration of the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. Now, I am not exaggerating.
The car industry had basically collapsed, and they had to say, well, how do we make now a new Birmingham?
The city fathers realised they had this gift. They'd got one of those people who can change the world. And he was literally the best known figure in Birmingham. People saw him in the street, didn't bother him, but truly the man in the street, everybody knew who he was.
Simon Rattle.
Simon Rattle. Simon Rattle.
Riddle. Simon Riddle.
It took more than 5 years and £160 million to build Symphony Hall, one of the most acoustically friendly concert halls in the world, and the cornerstone of a new Birmingham.
I remember being together in the room with the Labour bigwigs and the Conservative bigwigs and saying, look, we'll fight like cat and dog over all kinds of things, but where actually the future of Birmingham is, and the arts and the culture and that thing, no one's going to divide us. Whoever gets voted in will make the new hall happen, because we know this is the only way to change the city.
At last, on the 12th of June 1991, the Queen attended a gala concert to show off this fantastic orchestra in their shiny new hall.
I remember going to the opening of Symphony Hall, being part of the sheer excitement of that opening and feeling this is one of the best places I have ever encountered for music making. Some people found it too live. The phrase "you could hear a pin drop" was actually true. You could hear a pin drop, and you could hear people coughing and so on. But I think Simon knew immediately how to manage the hall and just made the most of this incredible liveness and vividness. It was just a moment that transformed Birmingham's status in the whole world of music, and it transformed the orchestra's status as well, because now they had a room in which they sounded really, really wonderful.
But all this phenomenal success would bring its own problems.
There was a time in the latter part of Simon's period in Birmingham where we were so closely associated as orchestra and conductor that he was both the orchestra's greatest strength and also its greatest weakness. It became very difficult to promote the qualities of the orchestra, which were indeed very fine, without Simon.
Well, it's been a dramatic week for the orchestra, a week in which its music director, Sir Simon Rattle, announced he's quitting the post. He's a hard act to follow and a figure dear to the hearts of the Birmingham public. Just ask anyone in the city centre to name a conductor.
Sir Simon Rattle, I think. And he's got great hair.
Wonderful chap.
I'm not a classical music person myself. I do know he's got a very good reputation.
It was the right time to leave so that they could go further, because there's a limit to what one person can give an orchestra. When I went back to do the Benevolent Fund concert, within about 5 minutes, we could have almost laughed, like, oh, this is so easy, because basically we're still speaking the same language.
Some things get better with time. I mean, let's hope that it's not all just a kind of downward spiral. Sometimes all of us wish we had the airy confidence of when we started, but that's not always to be. But there is something in a little bit of experience going, okay, this landmine I've already stepped on and I lost a limb because of that. Maybe this time I'll walk round it. What's interesting, you can be in your 50s and 60s and there's still plenty more landmines to discover.
It's less. Da-da and down. Yeah, and it's not a different tempo.
And the CBSO has, I must say, I'm so proud to have been involved with them, and I'm so happy that they're in such wonderful shape and have kept their own particular Sauvignon Blanc colour.
I always wanted to waltz in Berlin. Waltz in Berlin. Waltz in Berlin. The way things look, we'll be waltzing right into joy.
For more than a century, the Berlin Philharmonic have been at the pinnacle of German music making. So when the players elected a British conductor to lead them at the threshold of the new century,
Neuer Chefdirigent des Berliner Philharmonischen Orchesters heißt Sir Simon Rattle.
no one could have been more surprised than Simon Rattle himself.
Sir Simon Rattle has been chosen as the new chief conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic, which is widely regarded as the world's leading orchestra.
Who knows what they wanted? But I do think they saw that I could expand their repertoire and that I had a different view of what their future could be. As some of the players said to me before, you won't completely neglect our old favourites, will you?
Traditionally, the orchestra was famous for its rich repertoire of classical and romantic music.
They wanted something else, and we would try and decide together, well, what does an orchestra mean in this new century?
For his first concert as chief conductor, Rattle made a bold statement, asking the Berlin Philharmonic to embrace, alongside Mahler, the contemporary.
To begin his tenure in Berlin with a piece by me, by a young, if I may say, a British, not German, composer, and in a certain kind of language, was certainly a statement, and a very bold statement.
The orchestra found Asila very, very hard. I mean, really hard. It was very tough for an orchestra that is used to dancing their music. I mean, if you danced a lot of Asila, you'd break your leg pretty quickly.
I probably allowed myself to push the boat out a bit further in terms of structure, because I knew that something in the way he controls the line of the piece would bring out aspects I probably wasn't consciously aware of when I was writing it.
The new principal conductor of the Berlin Phil to bring a piece that was based on techno music to the Philharmonie for his inauguration. It was typical Simon.
we are, in our understanding, the most famous orchestra in Berlin and in the world. The orchestra is always open for new ideas, but you have to convince them and you have to make the best with your ideas, and this is what Simon has done.
I haven't liked all the stuff he's brought, but who likes all the stuff you have to play all the time?
It's just so exciting and fascinating to see what he does. As he's always been, you have to be very steadfast in your beliefs, have some kind of human touch and also an authority at the same time.
For more than a dozen years now, Rattle has consistently led the Berlin Philharmonic away from its comfort zone, taking the players into the unfamiliar world of the orchestra pit to explore opera.
You tell a story in a different way, and that's a difficult thing working with an orchestra that's not always playing opera. They don't always realise that you have to make a different sound. And sometimes, yes, it does have to be ugly. And sometimes, yes, it does have to be violent. It's great for an orchestra which is as sure of itself as the Berlin Philharmonic to have to be so flexible. Normally, everybody can deliver in an orchestral concert. But every night, a singer is different. They need a bit more breath, they need a bit less breath, and you must be there at their service at every moment. This orchestra can very easily, it's not exactly ignore the conductor, but they don't need a lot of help once they know a piece. But actually, a few of them said to me, wow, Puccini, we really need you. And it's a matter of making it all balance. And in some ways, I know I once said that conductors like being a kind of plug, an adapter plug between the music and the audience. But in this, it's more like you're a catcher at the circus. You have to be ready. Okay, what do they need?
There is not so many conductors who knows about singing what we need, where we need to breathe, why suddenly we slow down, why are we not suddenly faster. So that's the art of the conductor, to let people actually breathe and breathe with them. What is, I think, amazing about him, that he builds all his strengths and this incredible power he has on trust to other people. So he is not, in a way, the boss who is imposing his rules, but he really lets everybody feel that they are really good. I think it's very special for conductors because they don't make any sound, and they would love to as well. So it must be hard for them, you know, they want to produce the sound and they have only the people to kind of lead.
In the year leading up to his 60th birthday, Rattle has taken 202 rehearsals for 84 performances with 6 different orchestras. Today, it's the orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment. They play all their music on authentic period instruments.
Good. You're the melody.
They're rehearsing Joseph Haydn's Creation, just as it would have been heard in the late 18th century.
Grow.
Working with period instruments is very different from a modern symphony orchestra, but Rattle delights in the sounds that they produce.
Yeah, good. So we just have to get, okay.
So much of what I'd seen in classical scores, I was not hearing. And that the problems I'd often had with really dealing with this music were to do with a matter of simply what did this mean on the page? And a realization of what we've lost with a lot of modern instruments.
Just take your time over the first note would be beautiful. It's fantastic. It's got all that direction. It'd be great if it was very stable within the direction. Yeah.
You get the feeling as a member of the orchestra that he can see and hear exactly what every single member is doing at any given moment.
I go by for bars and bars without realising I've been playing from memory. Help, you know, so it's thrilling and it's a little dangerous too.
Even when I sometimes don't entirely see eye to eye with what Simon wants to do, there is nevertheless that wonderful spark.
Could you make your diminuendo a bit later? So, pa 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 ta 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 ta.
He really understands the expressive quality of these instruments and how it relates to the music we play. I think he's always liked the sound of the wooden flute. I mean, he was sold on that right at the start, which is nice for me to hear.
And bass here. Long. Yeah, great. Good. Yeah, good. The horns, could you be a bit less than 26 and a bit longer? Could we not go down too much? After so that it's still...
Over the years, they've been incredible surprises. I mean, simply unbelievable revelation of how it could sound.
Could we make the first one like da da pa 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 da pa 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 pam 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 each time, and then it can be a bit crisper and have a bit more character. It's a bit strange sometimes. So again, yeah, 23. 3.
Simon has a very emotional connection with it. Whatever you're playing with him, you do get the feeling that this piece of music matters so much to him and it's one of his favourite pieces of music.
Simon does trust us hugely. He's humble enough to allow us to play and mould us. I mean, if he doesn't like it, he's quite capable of letting us know.
Could you just a little bit of excess personality? Yeah. Oh, and because they do this beautiful character, let's do something else. The third bar. Let's be a little bit less and a little bit less gluey there.
He was completely brilliant the way he rehearsed it. He knew exactly when to unpick something in order to put it back together and when to leave well alone. And he just made us feel confident but at the edge of our seats at the same time.
One legato.
The orchestra it's such an unusual organism anyway.
Fabulous.
Is there any other area of life where so many incredibly skilled people have to subsume themselves to a greater whole? I can't really think of it.
The Easter Festival in Baden-Baden in the German Black Forest is one of the Berlin Philharmonic's annual events.
We're in the last 3 days of the festival. I have 4 concerts and 2 general rehearsals. You wake up in the morning feeling you're running on empty, but actually music really helps. Yeah, we're knackered, but it's worth being knackered if it's good. And what's a festival for? When everybody else has their holiday, then we're on parade.
The festival brings visitors to Baden-Baden from across the world, eager to see artists of the stature of Rattle, and today's soloist, the superstar violinist Anne-Sophie, who has a morning rehearsal with the orchestra.
We've known each other since we were kids, only she still looks like a kid. We've never done the Brahms together, so, this will be fascinating, and it's relatively little time. But sometimes fast cooking is great, you see, keeps the vitamins.
Yeah, I remember when he was also the young and up and coming. And it's very difficult to comprehend that he is turning 60. I've just turned 50, so time is a strange thing. Making music is a very interesting conversation, if it is a good concert, of course. There are boring concerts as well. But in a good concert, it still has a very fresh and totally believable emotional message, particularly for Sir Simon, who is as fresh mentally and, I dare say, physically. His wife knows better, but he is just as fresh as a daisy. He's as innocent, but much better informed than he used to be as a younger musician. It's wonderful to be a witness of his development as a conductor, if I may say, because more and more do I realize when we work together how much he has an incredibly in-depth understanding of the score. That gives you really the feeling that you can go anywhere, musically speaking, and he and the orchestra will follow.
Simon Rattle has flown to London for the day. He's been summoned to Buckingham Palace to receive a rare honour, membership of the Order of Merit, from the Queen.
I'm, in no sense a royalist, but I have enormous respect for what they do. I suppose I'm not even sure really what the OM involves, but I did look back at the list and humbled is the word. My early 20s, I realised, okay, I seem to have a career here, much to my surprise. I'd always meant to go to university. I remember thinking, well, am I only going to be a musician then? What else is there going to be? Could I be anything else? Could anything take the place of music? And so the idea came that maybe I could take a year. And I simply got in touch with some colleges in Oxford. I was able to do the 3 university terms. And I made myself a promise that I would not listen to music at all. In those weeks, I would simply just deal with poetry and literature and everything else. It was wonderful.
Cheers, Captain. See you later. Her Majesty said, for goodness sake, don't wear it when you're conducting, you'll lose an eye. My eldest son, who's now 30, when he was little, he used to say something, this lovely phrase, I'm very upsighted. So actually, it was very upsighting, very sweet. And now I feel a bit like David Attenborough saying, "There's a rather shy little thing here."
To mark the 100th anniversary of the start of the First World War, a ceremony was held at the military cemetery near Mons in Belgium. The music for the event was a special recording, symbolically bringing together some of the greatest musicians from Britain and from Germany.
Who is involved with two of the greatest orchestras on the planet, the London Symphony Orchestra and the Berlin Philharmonic, Simon Rattle. And so players, some of whom had never met each other before, came together and collaborated on a recording which was then used in the cemetery at Mons. He chose George Butterworth's Shropshire Lad. Now, Butterworth died in the trenches, and I think what Simon Rattle always wants is to take people on a journey.
Simon manages to make the serious stuff plenty serious, but immediately the human stuff is everywhere. And you hear that in the music making. His whole body is in it. And so that sense that music is engaging all of you, not some of you. Hello. Bless you, Simon Rattle.
It is one of the most extraordinary professions there is. The challenges never stop, and however much experience you have. If you're bored of conducting, then you're really in danger. And so I'm looking forward to the next years. And there was somebody said to me, Simon, the really good conductors, they only start kind of getting good when they're 65. You're no exception, so don't be in a hurry.
Sir Simon Rattle conducts the Berlin Philharmonic with music by Sibelius over on BBC4 tomorrow night at 8 o'clock.